everyone. In this video we're going to continue our UI lesson that we did previously, which just has a basic main menu that loads into a scene where we can run around and we can shoot a ball. And what we're going to do is we're going to add a soundtrack as well as some sound effects for when we shoot the gun. Okay, so first things first, we just want to gather our sound effects. So I want to have a gunshot and some music. So there are a couple of sites I would recommend. Freesound.org has a pretty good collection of sound effects. So for example, I found this cannon shot, and it's probably not the greatest sound effect in the world, but it'll suit us just fine. Another site I really recommend is incompetech.com. This is just full of so many different soundtracks that you can download. They're all royalty free. Now you will hear a lot of these soundtracks in a lot of different places. They're used a lot, and as always, be sure to credit anything you use. You can even see his message here, but this is a really good resource. Don't underestimate how much music and sound can really make a game feel a lot better. So I found this little piece of music. Just a fun little jazz piece. So I'm not sure it really matches the aesthetic of our scene here, but we'll use it all the same. So I'm just going to go ahead and drag these in from off screen. I'm going to drag them into my Unity editor. Give it a sec to load. And so importing audio is really basic. In Unity, you just drag and drop in the audio file, like you do most assets. Now, Unity supports just about any audio file you can throw at it. And I believe under the hood, it winds up converting everything into an OGG file, an OGG. Don't quote me on that, I'm not 100% sure. I do want to preface this saying audio is not my strong suit. I can implement it, I can play it, and I can script with it inside Unity, but audio formats and files are, well, they're not even what I'm going to really talk about today, but just so you're aware, just about anything should work. Depending where you download it from, it's always a good idea to rename it, so I'll rename this to Cannon Shots. And I like to organize my audio folder, so I'll make a folder called Audio, and then I organize these into subfolders, Soundtrack, and Sound Effects. Okay, so I'll drag Cannon Shot into here, and I'll drag this into here. Okay, and so it's really basic to get audio working inside Unity. Okay, there are a couple different things we want to talk about. First is the audio listener. And this is a component you've probably seen before. If you click on any camera you make, you'll see you have an audio listener component that doesn't actually have any properties. All the audio listener component does is tell the game, like, hey, this is where we're listening to audio. Okay, so if you had 3D positional audio, the position of the audio listener would affect things like how loud things are, depending on distance, for example. The next thing you want to understand is the audio source. So if the audio listener is where we're listening from, the audio source is where the sound is coming from. So the audio source just knows to play a sound clip. So if I said game object, and I created an I went to audio, I could create an audio source, okay? And you see that this audio source, something I can move around, and specifically, I can attach an audio clip to it. So if I click this, and you can see some of the stuff from standard assets are there. But here's my cannon shot, okay? And I could set this to play on awake, which just means when I start the scene, it'll play its sound effect. So an audio source takes an audio clip, okay? Audio clips are your actual sound assets. So an audio source is the point in 3D space where the sound is coming from. An audio listener is the point in 3D space that you are listening to the asset at, and then the audio clip is the actual sound itself. So if I hit play, that goes ahead and you can hear that cannon shot. So if you want 3D positional sound, there's all sorts of different sound settings you can mess with, but what you really want to look at when you do that sorry, when you look at any of your audios, you do want to take a look at these settings, okay? There's a bunch of different things, so you can force it to mono sound if you wanted to, and it compresses it into one audio channel, so you can kind of see what's happening with our waveform right there. In fact, I can expand it a little bit, right? Now, these load in background and preload audio data, I'll talk about in a bit, but they're also kind of important options. But we're just going to leave these as default for now. So I'm going to actually leave this audio source in here, and I'm going to call this my soundtrack audio source. Okay, so instead of putting my cannon shot in here, I'm going to go ahead and put my deadly roulette in there. Now if I hit play, we have audio. So I can mute the audio inside the game window. This was a feature that I wished existed in Unity ages ago, but it's actually pretty new. So if you're learning now, lucky you. But it's a good idea to be able to mute audio quickly. Anyway, so we have an audio source, okay? And you know, if it's a soundtrack, we'd probably want to set it to loop. I don't want to go through the whole thing, so I'll put the cannon shot back on there briefly, and we can see that looping does pretty much exactly what you'd expect it to. Alright. And you know, you can mute things, so like if you want stuff to keep playing, there's volume sliders, and these are all things that you can modify through code. We're just going to talk about really how we play specific clips. Okay, so let's set this back to the soundtrack. Okay, so what I want to do is when I hit play, I want to fire a cannon shot, okay? So on my play button, okay, I will have it, let's see, in the main menu, okay, the main menu has a script on it called load main. So in here, I want to play a sound effect, okay? So the way I choose what sound effect I want to play, there's a couple things I need to set up. I need to set up some sort of object that can handle playing my sound effects, and then I'm going to communicate with that object for my main menu script. So you will often be coding managers of different sorts of systems, and audio is no exception to that. You'll have an audio manager of some sort, and you'll tell that audio manager, go ahead and play this sound clip. And that way, whatever it says play the sound clip doesn't need to worry about how that sound clip plays. All it knows is that it wants a sound clip to go along with some bit of scripting. So instead, your sound manager says, okay, well, we know how to assign audio clips and things like that. So I'm going to leave this soundtrack audio source here, and I'm going to create an empty child of it, and then just so that everything kind of is neat in the hierarchy, I'm going to then flip it so that my soundtrack's actually a child of this. I'm going to zero this guy out, and I'm going to call this audio manager. All right, and so I like to put an underscore in front of my manager type objects. It's just a nice way for me to visualize it when I'm looking at the hierarchy. It's not imperative that you do that, though. I'm going to make a new script, and I'm going to call it sound or audio manager. I'll be consistent. That's a trap I get into. Sometimes I'll call audio sound or sound audio. Again, just always try to be consistent in a project. No way is necessarily better than the other. I'm going to attach this script to my audio manager. I'm going to open it up. Okay? And so in Unity, you can only play one clip on an audio source at a time. That's not, I suppose, strictly true. There are ways to get around it, but for our audio manager, we're going to assume that that's basically true. So we're going to need two audio sources then. We have an audio source for the soundtrack, but we're also going to have an audio source for sound effects, okay? And so not every sound effect is going to... The sound we're making is not going to be positional, okay? So I'm not going to care about distance or if it's like going through walls or anything like that. We're just playing basic sound effects. So to us, basically, we're going to treat every sound effect as if it was right on the camera. And by default, we don't really need to change anything. So this sound effects And in fact, even the soundtrack, I don't want to play on Awake. I'm going to handle the playing of things through my audio manager. So just to make sure that this is working right, when I hit play, I shouldn't hear anything. Okay, inside my audio manager, I'm going to start linking in a couple audio clips, okay? So audio clip, call this soundtrack. Audio clip, we'll call this cannon shot, okay? And actually, we're not even going to put that there. So the audio manager will keep track of our soundtracks, and then the scripts that want to play the canon will do that as well. Okay. Also, let me go ahead and restart Visual Studio so I get the autocomplete back up. This seems to only be a bug in this project that I've been having. Okay, there we go. Okay, so my audio manager, alright, now has this slot for an audio clip. And I'm going to drag in my, not my cannon shot, move. So, by the way, if you do drag in an audio clip onto a game object, it creates an audio source component. You see what I just did by accident, and it attaches your clip to it. Alright, I'm dragging a deadly roulette into that spot. And inside my audio manager, inside start, I want to play this soundtrack on my audio source. So I also need to get a reference to my audio source. We'll call it soundtrack source. We also want our sound effect source, okay? And so in start, we're going to say soundtrack source dot clip, okay, is equal to our soundtrack clip. All right, and then we're going to say soundtrack source dot play. Okay, so play is a function, clip is something we're setting. We're setting the clip to the soundtrack audio clip and playing it. When you just set the clip, it doesn't play automatically. In fact, usually when you swap clips, you probably want to stop the source and then set it to a new clip. So now, when I hit play, first I'll need to link my audio sources. So there's my soundtrack and my sound effects source. And if I hit play now, the audio plays, okay? So what I want to do is I want to make some functions here that will play some sound effects, okay? I'm going to make some public functions. I'm going to say public void play sound effect. Okay. And here I'm going to say sound effects source dot play one shot. So play one shot will set the clip and play it. It won't loop the clip though, so for a soundtrack type thing, you definitely want to set the clip like we did in start, but for sound effects, you want to use play one shot. And now this is where you can sort of get around the fact that you can only have one clip per source, but if you have a lot of these playing at once, it can actually sound kind of weird. So it's good to separate your channels. And here, I'm just going to say sound effect, in play sound effects, what I want to do is I want to pass in the audio clip I want to play. So audio clip, clip, and inside here, we're going to say clip. And just to make sure this works, I am also going to say, I'm going to just comment out this for a second, and we're going to just say play sound effect. We're going to play our soundtrack. So it should be more or less the same concept. Now you wouldn't want to play a soundtrack byte as a one-shot. You'd want to be able to stop it, and you don't quite have the same control when you do a one-shot. So I'm going to leave this alone for now, and we have a problem actually with what we have so far. Okay, when I hit play, the soundtrack stops. Okay, well that's sort of annoying, and there's a couple things we could do. First, I could go over into my main scene. Let me save that. I could drag in my Deadly Roulette again as a new audio source and have it play on Awake in here. I don't think that's the greatest solution though, because if I hit play, so if I do it that way, it just restarts. And that's really annoying. We don't want that. What we want to do is we want our soundtrack to be completely under our control, regardless of which scene we're in. And so there are a couple ways we could do this. We're going to talk about just one, though. We're going to talk about Don't Destroy on Load. Don't Destroy on Load is a really key function, and you should make a script in just about every single project you make that is called Don't Destroy on Load. And this is a component that's going to just add some functionality to whatever you attach it to. Namely, when a new scene is loaded, don't destroy it. So what happens when a scene is loaded inside Unity, okay? It basically instantiates every game object that's a part of that scene. So when main menu loads, these are all instantiated. And when this scene is unloaded, so when we load a different scene, everything is destroyed. Unless it's been marked with a Don't Destroy on Load. So in Don't Destroy on Load, we're just going to say Don't Destroy on Load. It's a function. And we're going to pass it this.gameObject. It's important that you say this.gameObject. If we just said this, it is only the component. It is not the whole game object itself. So now, okay, if I attach this Don't Destroy on Load, we're still going to have problems, of course. So what you heard there was that now both of my audios were playing. And very quickly, I want to add in a shortcut. I'm not going to make a new script to do this. It's just inside my gun script, which is part of the, which is what we made in the UI video. I'm just going to say if input.getKey down keycode.escape. If I press escape, I just want to load the main menu again. Load scene main. And what I just did there was I hadn't imported scene management. When I typed it in, because I knew I needed to type scene manager, Visual Studio knew that if I right-clicked it and clicked this quick action, it gave me the option to automatically type that in for me. It's really useful. Definitely suggest learning your development environment. Okay, so just in case you can't hear me over the recording too well with the music going, what I'm going to do here is I'm going to hit play. I'm going to load. I'm going to load back the main menu, and we're going to see what happens over here in the hierarchy. Always a mistake with me, but I meant to load main menu, and you still saw it to an extent, actually, what was kind of happening, but you'll really see it now. So what you saw is that we were getting copies of Audio Manager. And also, I didn't have my mouse available on the main menu when I went back to. So when I load that, when I load the main menu, so in main menu.start, I just want to make sure I can use the cursor. And in Unity, we just say cursor.visible equals true. And I'm also going to set the lock state to false. The lock state is just saying, are we going to lock the screen, lock the cursor to the screen? And we're not going to do that. We'll let it compile. Ooh. Oh, my bad. Cursor lock mode. So this is an enumerated type, and we're just going to say none. An enumerated type is kind of like a Boolean with more than true and false to an extent. So, that sounds dreadful, and you can see we have so many audio managers. Oh my goodness. This is a lot of audio managers, and each one is playing its own copy of the soundtrack. And we also have in main, we have this sound audio source. We just don't want that. We're just going to go back to main menu, and basically we want this audio manager, okay, and only one audio manager. We never want to make a second one, okay, or we really never want to let a second one survive. So we're going to use something called the Singleton Pattern. Now the Singleton Pattern can be a little dangerous. It can be a little bit of a kind of a dirty word, because it takes us dangerously close to global variables. And if you don't really know what you're doing, global variables can be a really bad thing. The Singleton, for our purposes, the way we're going to do this, it might be a little cheeky, but it's totally a fine thing to do, especially as a beginner. So the Singleton just means what we're talking about. We will never have more than one audio manager. Okay? And so the way we make a Singleton is we need to make a static variable of type audio manager. Okay, and a static variable means we don't need an instance of an object to reference it. So you notice how the soundtrack source is of type audio source, okay? In order for us to do .clip of an audio source, we need to have a variable of type audio source. Okay? So what we just did with the cursor is kind of not like that at all, right? We don't have a variable somewhere called cursor that we're modifying. That's because cursor has a static singleton attached to it. There's only one instance of the cursor class, and so when we say cursor.visible, the code automatically knows to assume we're talking about that specific object, that we're not talking about any others, because there can only be one. And so we're going to make the same thing. We will only ever have one audio manager. We won't ever let a second one finish creating itself. So there's a couple things I'm going to do. First, I'm going to change start to awake. And so we talked about this in the past, but awake is what's called before start is called. To be more specific, awake is called when the object is created, when it's instantiated, and start is called before the first frame happens while that object is active. So in awake, we're going to check the static instance. So to make the static instance, I'm just going to say private static, okay, keyword being static, audio manager. I'm making a static variable of type audio manager, and I'm going to call this instance. Alright, and now inside awake, I am going to make a check. If instance, okay, isn't null, and a null object just means, a null variable is just a variable that hasn't been set. So if instance has been set, okay, that means there's already an audio manager that exists. And if there's already an audio manager that exists, we want to destroy this one. So I can say destroy this.game object and return. Now, otherwise, we want to carry on like normal. Inside here, I'm going to say instance equals this. Okay, so I want to make sure that whichever one survives says that, okay, I exist. Okay? And now we can do something kind of really cool. Okay? I can make a public static audio manager variable called instance with a capital I. Okay? And having a private with a lowercase and a public with an uppercase is usually a good, sort of like the C# convention. Actually, me making these lowercase sort of breaks that convention. Again, find a coding style that works for you. Just be consistent. So I'm not doing the best job at that right now. So this is a property which I think we touched on briefly last week. And properties look and smell like variables, but they behave like functions. And so in here, I'm just going to return instance. All right? So static methods can only talk about static variables. So right now, if I were to type soundtrack dot clip equals or soundtrack source, like you see, I'm not actually even getting autocompletes, and that's because these are non-static variables. Okay, and now I get it because it figures I must be doing something wrong, but this is perfectly valid syntax right now, unless I have a typo. But if I go back to Unity, we can even see the error. Okay, and this says, a reference is required to access a non-static member. Okay, we are in a static feature, so we cannot access non-static features. So, if we did, what I would need to do is I would access my static object, and then I'd access the local one. So now I could do soundtrack, and I could say, sorry, not soundtrack, source equals soundtrack. Sorry, not clip. Okay. Oh, and again, I'd need to say instance dot. So, now it's valid syntax. This is a bad spot to do that, but we won't have any errors now. And it's done compiling. Alright, great. So I'm just going to go ahead and delete this, because I still only want to return the instance. Now with this being a static variable, okay, I don't need to link my audio manager through the inspector anymore. Not that we ever did. So there was one, let's do that. So over in main menu, I'm going to say public audio manager, I'm going to say audio. Or audio manager, okay? And then inside load main, I'm going to say audio manager, let's play a sound effect. And then up here, I'm going to add an audio clip. I'm going to say public audio clip, load sound, and we'll set that in the inspector to our cannon shot. And I'm just going to say play the sound effect, play our load sound. Okay? Alright, so main menu, that is, where is it? I can search for it. Alright, main menu, and I'm going to link in my audio manager. Alright, and my audio clip will be the cannon shot. Okay, so now if I hit play, unmute the audio. So we heard it play the cannon shot. Also, you can hear that the music isn't duplicating itself. So hold on, I'm going to mute the audio for a second. Alright, so what we just saw is that the audio manager kept playing the same song into the next scene, and when we went back to the main menu, we still only have one audio manager. So I'll do that again. Oh, oops. Okay, so I gotta restart the scene. This error was what I was going to talk about next. Alright, so we don't have any audio manager. We don't have a duplicate one, I should say. So what happened when I hit play, though, this is where Don't Destroy on load gets tricky, and this is another reason why the Singleton pattern is really useful. If I looked at main menu right now, you see that audio manager is missing now. And just to confirm that we set it, I'm going to stop the game, okay? See, it's there, alright? And that's because main menu loses track of that reference as we load the scene. When it's instantiated, it tries to look for audio manager in a specific spot, and that changes when it's been set to Don't Destroy on load. So what we really want to do, okay, instead of saying audio manager.play sound effects here and linking it through the inspector, I'm just going to go ahead and delete this, and instead we have this static Singleton instance. So I'm going to say audio manager.instance. And now this is functionally identical to accessing this cursor. We just made it on our own. Okay, and I don't need to change anything else. And I'm going to go ahead and I'm just going to lower the volume on this. Lower it on this as well. Cool. So, we're really close. Next thing I want to do is I want to add the gunshot sound to my gun. We're going to do it the same way we did it in the main menu. I'm just going to say public audio clip, gunshot. Okay? And inside shoot, I'm just going to say audio manager dot play, sorry, dot instance dot play sound effect. What did I call it? Gunshot. Okay? And so I need to go over to main, And before I do that, I'm going to go ahead and prefab my audio manager. We'll talk about that in a second. I'm going to go over to main, and if I hit play, alright, well, I'm going to get a bunch of no reference exceptions. One, I haven't linked my audio clip to my gun yet, okay? So I'm going to go ahead and do that. And if I hit play, well, we're still getting a null ref. In fact, we're not hearing the gunshot at all. Okay, and so I'll stop it, and let's look at the error, okay? Let's go right to where it says. It says instance is null and doesn't exist. That means there is no audio manager. And that just means there's no audio manager in this scene. That's why I prefabbed it. Okay, so now we have a gun that shoots. So the Singleton can be really powerful, okay? It's really especially useful for audio. And you can see, now I can start my game in any scene. I could start it inside the main menu, or I could start it inside the main game scene itself. Singleton, really powerful. Keep it in mind, especially as you start making multi-scene games. The Singleton is also how you'd store data from scene to scene. So if you had a score and you had a scene for the game and then you had a high score scene, you could put it on the score object that's not destroyed on load, and then you have access to it in the next scene. So I'm going to hop back over to the main menu. Alright, we're just about done here, but there's one more thing I want to show you with audio. Okay, so we have a couple of different utilities that Unity 5 introduced with audio. And the main one is the audio mixer. So if I go up to Window and Audio Mixer, alright, and I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to dock this guy here, okay, so that we can see at it. And the audio mixer is kind of what it sounds like. Well, it's an audio mixer. So I'm going to make a new folder in here. I'm going to call it mixers. And audio mixers are assets. So when I hit this plus button, I'm going to call it master. Just main kind of audio. Master's probably not the best name for it. In fact, I'll go ahead and rename it. We'll call it default sound mix. Alright, and this lets us divide different audio groups, okay? And audio groups, we're going to break them up for each channel, okay? So then we can control effects on each channel. So we have two channels. We have the soundtrack, alright, and the sound effects channel. Oh, go away, email. Okay, and you can see that it actually makes them children of each other, and we don't want these to be children of each other, they're siblings. There's always the master channel. Okay, and inside this mixer, we can control the volume output of each channel or group, as they call it, okay? So what I want to do is inside my audio sources, I want to apply these groups. And you can see this output lets me pick an audio mixer group, okay? So for my soundtrack, I want to link in the soundtrack group. And my sound effects, I want to link in the sound effects group, okay? Now I will hit apply. I'm going to apply this prefab. And you can see inside my mixer, I actually see the audio output. I can click this edit and play mode button, and I can actually fiddle with the audio mix. So the master is going to affect both my sound effects and my soundtrack. I'm going to go ahead and hit play, so I can usually access this. Well, I'm going to turn my sound effects down because that cannon shot's really overbearing. Now it's too quiet. So I can bump that up. And I'm going to go ahead and bump the soundtrack down. So this live audio mixing is really useful. And I could just edit each individual channel. So if I wanted to make another group, I could easily do that. This doesn't really have the pop I want. So I'll bump it up some more. Alright, well, I'm going to turn this down for a second. Okay. Let's get a little crazy. We can start adding in different sound effects, okay? So we can add in all of these processing effects to our audio. So well, we could distort this. That'd be fun. And I'll bump up the level. Wow. That's something. That doesn't sound that great, does it? We'll lower the level. We can add in all sorts of things. Oh, reverb, yeah. What do we need to do? We need to bump up decay time. This. Oh yeah, it's gonna be good. Oh, I forgot the most important. All right, you can sort of hear it going now. That's a powerful sounding gunshot. Oh. So we can add so many different things, alright? And because it was exposed in play mode, these actually save. So normally when you edit things in play mode, they don't save. So sound mixing is really powerful, and there are so many different things that are part of it. That's all I really wanted to jump into with audio. You can satisfy most audio needs for a project just with this brief overview. So we talked about audio. We talked a little bit about the Singleton pattern when it comes to programming, and we talked about the audio mixer. This ought to get you going on a project. In fact, at this point, you have just about the basics of all you need to make a game. You just got to figure out where the holes are and start researching on your own. So, yeah, let me know if you have any questions, and I'll talk to you guys next time.